before we talk about how to emerge as a leader in the age of AI, I want to talk about one elephant in the room, which is, especially after COVID, the cyberspace, social media is very dominant. And one of the things that I'm observing is that the conventional leadership that we've been taught may not be relevant in the age of social media. I can give you a good example. When I was studying my doctoral program, 2009 up to 2013, we used to say that, okay, for a leader to be successful, to influence others and to be followed by others, that leader should have the right mindset, a can-do mindset, and also some competencies and character and personality that is trustworthy, believable, credible, stuff like that. Now, when I see sometimes on social media, people follow people without even wondering about, questioning about, and being curious about these characteristics of effective leaders we've been taught in school. And I'm just wondering, I'm not saying this is a bad thing or a good thing, but I'm just wondering, do we still have conventional leadership, the mainstream leadership that we have known for decades, even for centuries, relevant in the area of social media?
Interesting. I would probably refer to the world of improv and comedy, where they use a concept called yes and. Yes, the traditional models are still applicable, but it depends on the context and where you're trying to lead, and in terms of how those models would apply. And they are not applicable anymore. They've been completely shattered. And we saw that, to your point, during the global pandemic, where a new series of influencers began to rise. Number one, influencers, because they would not have had a traditional level of authority, as Dr. Ronald Heifetz would classify it. They lacked authority in the eyes of others, but they had influence. And if you have influence, you really don't have to point to authority. People will willingly follow you. And so they've successfully used social media to garner followers. People follow them and they make very nice incomes without using the traditional models. We've seen how even when it comes to the world of politics and even commerce, people are realizing that you can be far more successful in many cases than following the traditional marketing or business strategies that people would have employed. Finally, I'd say that when you think about, I kind of referenced my time at GE in your first question. I think about how everybody wanted to be Jack Welch. If you were a GE leader, you were really highly sought after because you'd gone through Crotonville, you'd gone through what was considered the best management training in the world. Well, that training has changed. What are people looking for, especially now, as the Harvard Business Review says, you have 5 generations of people working in the workplace. The leadership that was successful in the 90s and the 2000s has truly evolved. And therefore, while some leaders today might pull from the best of those times, the most successful leaders today will find that they're really having to work under a new leadership dynamic.
I love Jack Welch. I know he's a bone of contention. There are some controversies around him, but he's one of my look up to kind of leadership experts, both practitioner and expert. I read his biography, I think, direct from the gut. And it's fascinating how he rose from the bottom to become the top leader and transformed so many things about, especially how to measure success. And I admire him. One question I would ask you is, what are some of those qualities of Jack Welch that are still relevant in the 21st century?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because I can't think of the book that I read, but essentially there was this book that kind of looked back on the Jack Welch era. And as I was reading it, The Man Who Destroyed Capitalism, I believe was the title, something along those lines. And as I was reading it, I was literally reliving every aspect of my GE career, because it was kind of like when I went to Northwestern. It was one thing to read a Harvard Business Review article, for example, or case study about a organization, but it's another one when your company is the one that's being featured. So I felt like that when I was reading this book all over again. And so a lot of the leadership principles that were extolled, that were copied and said to be best practice, really, in hindsight, people look back and question, was it really that good? Or should there have been a different way? And so we look at how GE ended up as a result, and there's been great coverage on this in the Wall Street Journal as well. We look at how GE has, where GE is today. And so that leadership style is really questioned. And would there have been better models? And what happened to the leaders that copied Jack Welch and went and ran other organizations? Well, they didn't really have a good track record. They did not have that same success. So it seemed to uniquely work at GE, and uniquely there was some less than accurate coverage and less than accurate reporting that was allowed to go on undiscovered until long after, unfortunately, Mr. Welch passed.